So as promised, I am making a video for the cell organelles that you guys will be responsible for on your exams. Most of you will be familiar with these, of course, because you just finished your cell projects and everybody had to do one in a group, so you know exactly what organelles I will be talking about. But in short, the way that this video is broken up, it's going to talk about where these organelles are found, what cells they're found in, what their functions are, and kind of where their locations a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first organelle I want to talk about is the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is actually found in all three cell types that we have. We have plant cells, animal cells, and prokaryotic cells. All three of them actually have a cell membrane. And the cell membrane is really important because it controls what moves in and out of the cell. It is actually composed of phospholipids and proteins. When we talk about biomolecules, we'll go into more about that. But pretty much, it's like I said, its job is to help control what goes in and out of the cell. And so it is found, of course, around the perimeter of the cell. If you're talking about an animal cell, it's the outermost perimeter of the cell. If you're talking about a plant cell, it's actually the next layer inside. If you're moving from the outside of the cell in, you'll have the cell wall, and then you'll have the cell membrane. And then if you're talking about a prokaryotic cell, it's actually the last layer moving from the outside of the cell in. So if it's prokaryote, you would have your capsule, your cell wall, and then your cell membrane. So the nucleus is just specific for eukaryotic cells, meaning only plants and animal cells have a nucleus. And the nucleus's job is really to contain DNA. Then that's really its whole job. It's kind of a centralized location that DNA is stored in eukaryotic cells, and most of the time it is found in the middle. If you're in an animal cell, it's usually found in the middle. However, if you're in a plant cell, it's kind of a little bit off to the side, and that's because of that very large central vacuole that plant cells have. Our nuclear envelope. So again, this is strictly for eukaryotic cells because they're the only ones that have a nucleus. The nuclear envelope is much like the cell membrane in the sense that it is the membrane that surrounds the nucleus. So it's pretty much it's what I have up there, membrane around nucleus that contains pores. And the reason it contains pores is because it controls what goes in and out of the nucleus. Just like the cell membrane controls what goes in and out of the cell, the nuclear envelope controls what goes in and out of the nucleus. And so I kind of have an example there a little bit in the picture. The nucleolus. So the nucleolus is actually found in the center of the nucleus. And again, nucleolus is strictly for eukaryotic cells because it is found inside the nucleus, and only eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. So it's found in the center of the nucleus, and its job is to actually make ribosomes. To make ribosomes for the cell. So please don't get confused the nucleus with the nucleolus. The nucleus's job is to store DNA. The nucleolus's job is to make ribosomes. Two different functions. So let's actually get into what a ribosome is. So ribosomes are actually found in all three cell types. We find ribosomes in plant cells, animal cells, and prokaryotic cells. And so ribosomes pretty much are the site where proteins are constructed using amino acids. So pretty much it helps build proteins. That's what our ribosomes are for. And we can have ribosomes in two different locations if we're talking about eukaryotic cells. It can be found in the cytoplasm, kind of free floating in the cytoplasm, or we can find ribosomes attached to our rough ER if we're in a plant or an animal cell. If we're in a prokaryotic cell, we only find ribosomes free floating because prokaryotic cells do not have rough endoplasmic reticulum. They don't have any organelles. Chromatin, or DNA. So chromatin is just kind of the compact form of DNA, and it's the compact form when DNA is wrapped around proteins, which we'll get into later when we talk about DNA. But just for DNA's purposes, it's found in the nucleus. If you're talking about a eukaryotic cell, meaning a plant or an animal cell, or it is found in the nucleoid region, which I have there, if you are talking about a prokaryotic cell, because prokaryotic cells do not have nucleus. So Therefore, it's in what we call a nucleoid region, or just kind of a region in where the DNA is kind of hanging out. And so the job of the DNA is to give instructions to the cell on how to make proteins. That's really what the DNA does. It kind of dictates what proteins are going to be made in the cell. It's the cell's kind of blueprint, I guess you can say, of what it needs to build. The cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm, of course, is also found in all three cell types. It is the thick jelly-like matrix that surrounds all of the inside of the cell. And so if you're talking about a plant cell or an animal cell, it's the fluid that surrounds all the organelles that they're suspended in. If you're talking about prokaryotic cells, it's just kind of what the DNA and the ribosomes within the prokaryotic cell are suspended in. And so pretty much the cytoplasm, it's got a lot of stuff going on. Most of the time it's the site where important chemical reactions are taking place. But again, it's really found everywhere inside of the cell. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So smooth endoplasmic reticulum is strictly for eukaryotic cells, so strictly for plant and animal. And the job of the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is actually involved in transportation of proteins throughout the cell, and it also helps detoxify. So it detoxifies drugs and poison that may come into the cell, and it's very important. These jobs are the cell uses quite often. So this is the job of the smooth, and I want to put the emphasis on the smooth, okay? The smooth is actually found right beside the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which we have in this picture. So this would be the smooth, and this would be the rough. And they're actually really close to the nucleus region. Rough endoplasmic reticulum. So the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the reason it's called rough is because it's spotted with a bunch of ribosomes, and its job is to also help the cell in making proteins. So the rough endoplasmic reticulum is found directly around the nucleus, and again, please don't confuse it with the smooth. It actually has a very separate job, very distinct job. Golgi apparatus. So the Golgi apparatus is actually where chemicals are stored. It also is in what I call the shipping and receiving department. So the Golgi apparatus is what helps package and ship things that the cell needs to get around inside the cell and outside of the cell. So if the cell has some proteins that it needs to get outside of the cell, the Golgi would help kind of pack together those proteins and ship them on out. If the cell has some sort of particles or food or something that it needs to be shipped around, the Golgi is what kind of helps with this packaging. So this is the job of the Golgi. It's actually found near the near the cell membrane. And the reason that's because it kind of sends off these little packages, which you see right here. And so these packages need to be close to the membrane so that in case they need to be kind of excreted or taken out of the cell, they can have a close kind of proximity with the cell membrane to kind of help send things out of the cell. So this is the job of the Golgi. Vesicles and vacuoles. So I kind of group these together. They do very, very similar jobs, so that's the reason why I grouped them. The vacuoles are actually typically larger than the vesicles, and they help with storing kind of water. Usually when we talk about plants, they help with water storage for plants. They also can help store other materials like waste, some of them. Some of them can store foods that the plant and animal cells will take in to kind of digest and get nutrients from. And so vesicles are a lot smaller. They're found in animal cells. They're also found in plant cells, but they're pretty small in comparison. And of course, vacuoles are also found in animal cells, except they are significantly smaller than they are in plant cells. So plant cells, like I said, have this large central vacuole that helps store water. Mitochondria. So the mitochondria is again strictly for only plant and animal cells, so only eukaryotic. And the mitochondria's job is really to kind of powerhouse the cell or provide energy to the cell. And the way that it does this is by breaking down a sugar called glucose, and it helps produce energy, produce ATP for the cell via the breaking down of glucose. So we call it kind of the powerhouse. It's found kind of scattered all throughout the cell. It can be just free floating in the cytoplasm. And so again, it's strictly for just eukaryotic. Okay, cytoskeleton. So cytoskeleton is actually found for all three cell types. Cytoskeleton is found in both prokaryote and plant and animal cells. And pretty much the cytoskeleton is just what it sounds like. The skeleton in our bodies help kind of keep our shape. And the cytoskeleton helps support the structure or keep the shape of our cell. So it's kind of the skeleton of the cell. And it's made up of these different types of microfilaments and microtubules. You don't have to worry about centrioles right now because we'll talk about that in a second. But they're pretty much made out of these microtubules and microfilaments, which would be kind of like what the bones are for us. It is more or less the bones of the cell. And again, it's found all throughout the cell, all throughout suspended in the cytoplasm. And if you look in this picture down here, the yellow fluorescent kind of little lines you see all throughout these cells, these would be our cytoskeleton. So let's just talk about organelles that are found in plant cells. This is actually a little bit of a misnomer. I went ahead and I included cell wall under just strictly plant cells, and I made a boo-boo because I forgot that plant cells actually are not the only ones that have cell walls. Prokaryotic cells also have a cell wall. So this is not necessarily strictly for plant cells. Prokaryotic cells do have cell walls as well. And pretty much what the cell wall is to help give support to the cell. And especially when you're talking about a plant cell, it kind of holds the structure and gives the support structure to the cell that the plant cell needs. And it is found, of course, on the outside of the cell membrane. It is, if you're talking about the plant cell, it's the outermost layer. If you are talking about the prokaryotic cell, it is actually the middle layer between the cell membrane and the capsule. Chloroplasts. So chloroplasts are strictly for, what we're going to say for purposes of this class, strictly for plant cells. And chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis, or where glucose is made in this organelle. Kind of the energy that the cell needs is made within the chloroplast. So they are very important. You will find them suspended all throughout the plant cells. Now, organelles that are only found in animal cells. Again, this is a little bit of a misnomer. There are a couple in here that are actually also found with prokaryotes, and I'll make sure I specify when we get to them. Alrighty, lysosomes. So we're going to say for purposes of this class that lysosomes are found in just animal cells. Lysosomes, their job is to contain digestive enzymes to help break down and digest any old organelles that the cell may have, or any food that it takes in, or a virus or a bacteria that's trying to invade. So it's kind of like the immune system and the digestive system of the cell, kind of rolled into one. And if you see the picture down here, you kind of see the cell taking in this food particle, and then all of a sudden these lysosomes come on in, and they begin to digest or break down this food particle, and then later eliminate it or excrete it out. Okay, cilia. So, again, cilia, this is a misnomer. It's not just an animal cell. It's actually an animal and prokaryotic cells. And cilia really aid in cell movement. They look like hair-like structures on the outside of my cell. And again, they just help with the cell movement, and it makes the cell mobile. And, again, found in prokaryotic and animal cells. The flagellum, again, another misnomer. It's not just animal cells. Actually, prokaryotic cells have this too. And the flagellum is a tail-like structure that also helps in cell movement, but this kind of helps like in a faster movement. It kind of works like a propeller, that it more or less kind of propels the cell somewhat fast for some cells in any direction that it needs. And if you're talking about animal cells, one particularly in humans, sperm is actually a really good example of a cell that has a flagellum. So sperm have flagellum because sperm need it to move, or kind of swim, you should say, when it's helping with reproduction. Centrioles. So we're going to say that centrioles are just found in animal cells, and the function more or less of the centrioles is to help aid the cell in cell division. So when it's time for the cell to divide, the centrioles come to its aid. And these centrioles are actually found very close to the nucleus, because when the cell is about to divide, the nucleus plays a really big role in where it dictates the cell's division. Okay, parts that are only found in prokaryotic cells. So the first would be the capsule, and I've been talking about capsule a lot, but the capsule pretty much is a protein coating on the outside of the cell. And so if you look at my picture down here, my capsule would be that black line that's all the way around my cell. It's a protein coating, and it kind of helps protect the cell against viral invasions that can occur, because bacteria cells can also get viruses. So the capsule kind of helps out in protecting the prokaryotic cells from these viral invasions. And it's the protective coating, I guess you could say, on the outside of the cell. The nucleoid. Again, I brought this up earlier, but I'll specify it more in depth here. The nucleoid is a region which contains the DNA in prokaryotic cells. So since prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, the nucleoid region more or less serves where the DNA is kept. And so in my picture here, my nucleoid region would be all right here in the center, because that's where my DNA is actually at. So really, its job is just kind of where the DNA is kind of stored in the prokaryotic cells. And so that's my organelles for you. I encourage you to watch the video as many times as you need to kind of get down all of the organelles and what their jobs are. If you have any questions, you remember that my tutorials are on Tuesdays, so please come and see me if you need some help on this.